pressure.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll just let the secretary know.
Hey, sure.
Hey, Chair Craven, this is Brian. Can you hear anything?
Hey, Brian, I can hear everything. Yep.
Okay, cool. You're my first audio test. Thanks. Yep, and we can hear you too.
Smile, Matt, no matter what you're thinking.
Yeah.
He and Lisa used to team up on me. Get started. We have a quorum and then some. We're ready to go. So good morning. Calling the meeting to order. Just a reminder, the meeting's live
Recording in
streamed
progress.
and recorded. Catherine and Dalita are remote. Catherine has asked me in her absence to chair the meeting today, which is, thank you, Catherine. And I believe Kristen will be joining in about half an hour or so. Again, I said it's recorded, so if you want to, can we each introduce ourselves, or let's each introduce ourselves. I don't think you need to be up there for that. So let's go around the table first, and then we'll go to Catherine and Dalita.
Marianne Stewart, Lexington.
Farzana Mohammed, Newton.
Erica Fisher, Worcester.
Matt Hills, Newton.
Pedro Martinez, Commissioner.
Pat Tutwiler, Secretary.
Marty West from Newton.
Isabella Chamberlain, Hudson.
Christina Grant, Cambridge.
Catherine?
Catherine Craven, Brookline.
Delita?
Dalida Hasha, Worcester.
Great, thank you. We're going to start, as we always do, with public comments. Just a reminder, each person has 3 minutes. There'll be a bell at the 2.5-minute mark, and I'll ask each person to wrap up over the next 30 seconds. And at the 3-minute mark, I'm going to ask to please bring the remarks to a close. We're going to keep it to 3 minutes so we can get through the agenda, everything on the agenda in a timely manner. There's no engagement with the board during public comments. This is the opportunity for the public to address us. First up, Max Page, President of the Mass Teachers Association.
Good morning. How are you? My name is Max Page. I'm president of the Massachusetts Teachers Association, which, as you know, represents 117,000 public school and college educators in the state. I also just want to note today that on Monday, November 24th, will be our 180th birthday. Founded 85 educators in downtown Worcester, 8 years after the formation of this august body. And I think when we talk about the greatness of public education in Massachusetts, don't forget the connection between that. The creation of universal public education immediately after creation of advocacy, and ultimately a union for public school educators. So I wanted to first just urge you to read this report, which was sent to all of you. This is relating to the Graduation Council. It is, I want to be clear, it is a yes document. It is about what the vision is of our members after many, many conversations over many years about what they want from their public schools and how we can craft graduation requirements that match the visionary vision of a graduate that the state has discussed and laid out, which matches many of our local portraits of a graduate, which are grand visions. I think many of us would agree on the vast majority of it. So this is about laying out how do you set graduation requirements that structures learning, that emphasizes deeper learning, emphasizes citizenship, emphasizes creativity, and is not tied to high stakes tests. So I urge you to read that in the light, in the kind of the way it was offered. The second important thing, I know you're talking about budget priorities today, and just in a few hours, we and a coalition of a large number of groups will be delivering to the governor over a fiscal crisis letter with over 1,100 signatures of elected union leaders, but also elected officials, school committee members, city councilors, mayors, all across the Commonwealth. We set a goal of 250, then we set a goal of 500, then we set a goal of 750, and now it's around 1,100, and people are desperate still to get on. This is the level of the crisis you are seeing out there. If you look on the news, and just most recently saw the students walk out in protest of the 23 educators in Whitman-Hanson who are being laid off because of $1.4 million budget deficit. We have done remarkable things with the Student Opportunity Act and investment, so I'm not criticizing that. We have to look at the situation again now. We need to address those, and there's a number of things. I know I'm running out of time. The special education circuit breaker, fixing the Chapter 70 inflation gap, fully reimbursing in district as well as regional school transportation, significantly increasing rural aid, and further meeting the financial impact of charter schools on public schools, and continuing the investment to have fair and adequate pay for educators in our schools. So I'm going to just urge you to take those on in the urgency that the people you represent are bringing it to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in to speak. Next is Deb McCarthy. She's here yet?
She's not here.
Okay. Well,
Just traffic.
okay. Next, Karen McLaughlin. And in the on-deck circle, Jerry Morose.
So I'm Karis McLaughlin, and I just want to make sure that people know who it is, so they won't make any mistake. I came to speak to education licensure, which is always important. And as we look at who's in front of our students, it's important that they see a representation of America in their classrooms. Even as we're in a political environment that might tell us otherwise, there are fully competent people who do not have to be included because of the color of their skin to have a job. They can be there just because they are highly qualified. So I want to remind the Commonwealth that we still have a commitment to each one of our children. And when I think about the experience of African American children who are indigenous and who are owed the support of not only our local governments, but our state government and our federal government, I haven't forgotten that there are amendments that cover those particular children, and I intend to make sure that that memory is kept in the front, because it is still important, and we have not done the work yet that we're supposed to do. And so I looked at very quickly the restoral of Massachusetts as a #1 system, and I've told you for a while that we're not #1. We cannot be #1, and we still have some children who are lagging behind. So that myth, and I could call it something else, but I won't do that publicly, that myth needs to be put to bed. It is not true, and it's not fair to children and parents who are looking to this system to make it right for them. This is your obligation, and it's the obligation of every superintendent who collects their wonderful salary each year, the teachers, the principals. And so that leads me to a statement, and it says, and this is the whole problem with Massachusetts, it says the goal should be to enable students to show what they can do and not how they compare. And what does that get us out of? School accountability.
30 seconds, please.
I have asked this group to embrace school accountability for every single school, for every single district. Don't keep this myth going on that it's not about who they compare to, because they are being compared to other kids and civil rights are being taken away from them. So that statement needs to be clarified. It's not fair to the kids. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in to speak. Next, Jerry, and after Jerry, Brianna Limba's up next.
Good morning. High dosage tutoring succeeds because you pair an educator with a student to teach the student what they're ready to learn and need to learn next along the curriculum sequence. In contrast, classrooms all over the Commonwealth are filled with students assigned to classrooms based solely on, primarily according to their age, trying to teach all of them what the department thinks is a wonderful grade-level curriculum. Research shows that in the 4th and 5th grade classrooms, typically, there's an average of 7 grade levels of learning readiness. We expect every 4th and 5th grade teacher to perform some miracle to give full instruction to all children. It's impossible, it doesn't happen. Scaling up high dosage tutoring means creating a different education system, not just more professional development or more ed prep program requirements or more anything. It means needing a competency-based progression system where students are identified using things like computer adaptive assessments of what they know and what they're ready to learn. A competency-based system can still account for social readiness, emotional readiness, behavioral readiness. But importantly, our schools are here to teach students according to their academic readiness. And every year we put a student in a classroom teaching them the age average curriculum, whether it applies to them or not. That's a problem that the adults have created in the system. I've come to this board for many years asking you to take the lead because the department never has and the legislature never has. Ask the legislature in your budget priority to fund a study about how Massachusetts could incorporate or implement a competency-based progression education system. It doesn't mean strict tracking. It doesn't mean a lot of things that the myths believe. But the future of education is competency-based progression if we want to scale up, putting every student, challenging every student within their zone of proximal development. I urge the new commissioner to look into this when others never have. For the last 20 years, we've doubled down on our 1990s era assessment and accountability
30
system.
seconds, please.
Thank you. And it hasn't worked. We wring our hands year after year about all the assessment data and the outcomes of students. We need to do something different. I appeal to you. The commissioner is mentioning today about the 50th anniversary of IDEA. It was voted into law. It's Public Law 94-142, voted in November 29th. The day before, Public Law 94-135 was the Age Discrimination Act of 1975 that essentially says that you can't discriminate against children according to their age in an education program. Let's look at that for Massachusetts and lead the country. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in to speak. Next up, Brianna Limbaugh, and after Brianna, Nina Alley.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm Brianna. I am a graduate student currently in the social work program at Anna Maria College. And so the last couple of months, I have been heavily researching childhood and adolescent obesity and how, unfortunately, school environments are contributing to this. And now I know it's not directly related to today's agenda, but a lot of it does stem from lack of, from budget cuts, lack of funding, and then also staff shortages. Nearly 1 in 5 children ages 2 to 19 are obese, and rates are tripling in recent decades. Children spend more than 6 hours a day, 5 days a week there, yet too many cafeterias are serving like heavily processed foods, and physical education is no longer a priority. Today, 68% of school districts are struggling to meet basic federal nutritional standards because of budget cuts and staffing shortages. And the numbers are actually even more alarming when we look at race and income. 26% of Hispanic youth and 22% of Black youth are affected, compared to just 14% of white youth. Low-income families, especially families of color, who often live in food deserts, rely on school meals as a primary source of nutrition. And when those school meals fall short, our kids are unfortunately paying the price with higher risks of diabetes, heart disease, mental health challenges, stigma, and low academic performance. What I'm pretty much advocating for is that, we do have tools that work. We have the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act that is working to set stronger standards. We have the Massachusetts Fresh Grant, which brings local farm food into cafeterias and teaches kids where real food comes from. We have current bills like the Reducing Obesity and Youth Act and the new Make America Healthy Again proposal, which would limit junk food in schools and also restore daily physical activity. So I'm asking you guys, I'm asking the board on behalf, obviously, of the department, just to have public support that is fully funding the reauthorization of the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act. And then also advocating for bringing successful models like, the Fresh Farm to School program to every district in the Commonwealth.
30 seconds, please.
Especially our highest need schools in those urban areas and low-income areas. And then just to commit to protecting, expanding daily physical education. Our children's bodies and brains depend on it. Thank you so much. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in to speak. Next up will be Nina Alley, and Deb McCarthy's come in. If you want to speak after Nina, that'd be fine. You were already on, so that's fine.
Good morning. Excuse me. My name is Nina Alley, and I am a Teach Plus Fellow and Massachusetts educator, working to advance equitable research-based practices in education statewide. I am here to share concerns regarding full inclusion models in the Massachusetts classroom. Christian, one of my former 6th grade students, was a typical 11-year-old in many ways. He loved cars and video games and his dog. In September of his 6th grade year, Christian and I met over an argument about his name. The expectation was for students to write their full name on the assignment, but Christian had scribbled CD across the top of his page in the least legible handwriting I had ever seen. As I found out later, Christian was unable to spell his last name. My school, as many others in our state and country, have shifted toward a full inclusion model where students with disabilities learn in general education classrooms alongside their peers, supported by special education teachers to some degree. This support varies district to district. In my district, students receive co-taught math and ELA classes, but are otherwise unsupported directly by a special education teacher in other classes, even when their disability impacts their access to the curriculum. It is students like Christian that make me wonder whether full inclusion models are most beneficial for our students with disabilities. After reviewing several articles regarding the effectiveness of inclusion classrooms, the results have left much to be desired. Often inconsistent and inconclusive, it has been noted that students in inclusion classrooms scores in math and reading, as well as psychological, emotional, and behavioral outcomes, were no higher for students with disabilities who learned in general education classrooms compared to peers with similar disabilities who learned in sub-separate classrooms. When students like Christian, whose disabilities have led to huge gaps in learning and deficit in skills, are expected to access curriculum even 2 to 3 grade levels above their ability, it leaves them frustrated and defeated, and teachers scrambling to identify supports, resources, and times for more targeted interventions. For the majority of Christian's day, he is not directly supported by the special education teacher. It is him in a classroom with 10 to 15 other students on IEPs, in addition to students with other unique learning needs, such as students with limited English proficiency, and 20 to 30 other students, and often one teacher left to support them all. I'm not saying that inclusion is bad across the board. There are instances where students with disabilities, when given the appropriate support, are able to access the general education classroom successfully. Instead of segregating all students with disabilities to sub-separate or self-contained classrooms, students should be pulled out of the general education system to receive a targeted intervention that meets their individual needs. A one-size approach is not the answer on either end. Students like Christian need to have access to support they need throughout their day to make
30 seconds,
meaningful
please.
and measurable progress towards their learning goals. I urge you to consider this matter and the lack of evidence that is available to support the full inclusion models. Our students deserve an education that meets their individual needs. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in to speak. Next up, Deb McCarthy, Vice President of the Mass Teachers Association, and after Deb will be Robin Shea.
Thank you. Traffic was horrendous. Almost a month has passed since I last spoke, and I want to share with you some of the conversations that I have had with educators in this Commonwealth, specifically those that pertain to attendance and Chapter 70 funding. When I last spoke, I shared with this board the crisis before our schools around physical and emotional safety, and even highlighted that in some districts we are buying educators Kevlar vests. The underfunding, under-resourcing, and understaffing of our schools has led to a fiscal crisis that has forced community after community to seek an override. Simply put, our municipalities are unable to meet the unfunded mandates before them, and this system has created a situation that is unsafe. Just last week, I visited a school outside of Boston and met a third-year educator with a black and blue the size of a softball on her eye. This injury was caused to her by a 5th grader whose learning profile would be best met in an outside placement setting. But because of the out-of-district tuition costs and transportation costs for these programs are so prohibited, districts attempt to provide in-house interventions on a shoestring budget. Many of these educators are facing physical assaults on the job site, and they are our ESPs who are being paid poverty wages, and in some cases working 2 to 3 jobs. When they need to take the time off because of the injury sustained, they lose the desperately needed incomes from their other jobs, all which is compounded by healthcare benefits that are either non-existent or subpar at best. This leads me to my next talking point, which is the release of the attendance data today. I think it is important to have data, but I think it is important to note that this data does not identify those who are absent from school because they were assaulted on the job. Those who are absent from school because they are using their sick days for the arrival of a new child because they do not have PFML, or those who are using their sick days because they were denied the entry into Retirement Plus and they are taking care of a dying spouse or parent. Many educators only recently received the contractual right to PFML. However, this protected benefit is being recorded as an absence. We have thousands of veteran educators denied Retirement Plus who have worked 25 to 35 years, and they cannot retire financially. It is impossible, but they need to use their sick days to deal with natural events of getting old. Data is critical, but I am hoping that we use this data properly and that we do not use it to harm or shame educators who are being absent for other reasons. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in to speak. Sorry about the traffic.
No, but thank you. Thank you.
Next up is Robin Shea, and then after Robin, Benjamin Foreman.
Good morning. I first want to thank the Department of Education and board members here today for the consideration to move forward with an alternative licensure pathway. I'm speaking on that subject for our potential teachers. I'm here today to proudly represent my son, Andrew Shea, who is not here because he is a paraprofessional at the Beverly Public High School working in the Ladders program. He is supporting students with social and emotional issues, and I'm very proud of his valuable work. Andrew's story: he is a product of the Beverly Public School system. He thrived in Beverly, placed on an IEP for early detected learning disabilities at the age of 3. He was able to have great success academically with support. His dream has always been to become a teacher with a concentration in physical education. Andrew attended Westfield State College and is a proud graduate, earning his bachelor degree in movement science physical education. He was part of the Bonacos Learning Disability Center, which I encourage everyone to look into. He thrived there and, despite all of his challenges, achieved a 3.0. Please see the letter of reference from Dr. Bowler, Chair and Physical Education Coordinator. During his time at Westfield, he was not able to pass the MTELs. So therefore, he was not allowed to student teach. However, if you look at Dr. Bowler's letter, he was an exemplary in every aspect of this program. So part of my request today is I've read through the red lines in your documentation to allow other pathways to be considered. Not having passed your MTEL in a state school does not allow you to move forward with student teaching. Westfield would not accept him into the master's program because of this. Salem State has not accepted him into the program. But if you see his resume, he has endless hours of working with students, not directly in his field, because he does not have a student licensure. So that's a tough one to accomplish. After he graduated, the practice version of the tests in physical education was introduced. He has taken it 6 times, is registered again in January. He has spent over $3,000 in tests, tutors, and online support. He plans to start his master's degree, but again, this one test is holding him up. He would love to teach in your school systems. He doesn't care about the pay. He wants to make a difference. So I'm hoping the board can consider, along with a master's degree, the preparatory program, which he did completely, but he just missed the student teaching.
30 seconds.
Other ways to include work experience, the letter Dr. Bowler has provided. You need great teachers like him. Yes, he has learning disabilities, and test taking is not his thing, but he was only 8 points away on the last test. 8 points away from prohibiting a master's, 8 points away from moving forward. You would be lucky to have him in your school district. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in to speak. Next, Benjamin Foreman, and after Ben will be Chris Fisicella.
Good morning. I'm Ben Foreman, Director of the Massing Policy Center. I've come before you this morning to provide public comment and share findings from an analysis of capital investment in K-12 school facilities that we conducted in partnership with the Worcester Regional Research Bureau. I recognize this board has many oversight responsibilities, and school construction is one of the few that doesn't fall on your lap. However, the board does have responsibility for setting policies to close achievement gaps, and our study finds very strong suggestive evidence that inequitable access to safe and effective school buildings is a major contributor to these gaps in Massachusetts. The concentration of low-income students and students of color in substandard facilities fuels achievement gaps in 3 ways. First, these students are less likely to have access to appropriate learning spaces for art, for music, for physical education, and they're more likely to be exposed to harmful environments, such as spaces with poor air quality, poor light, classrooms that are uncomfortably cold or uncomfortably hot. Second, low-income students and students of color are much less likely to have experienced educators, in part because poor building conditions contribute to high rates of teacher turnover. And third, low-income students and students of color are more likely to be in schools with high concentrations of poverty, again in part because families with financial means don't send their children to schools that are substandard and lacking in basic learning features. So how might you as a board respond? First, the board can fulfill its charge under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 69, Section 1B, and establish standards for elementary and secondary school buildings that are consistent with what we know about environmental design, public health, child development, as well as our high expectations for educational achievement that we hold for both our students and teachers today. Early in the new year, the MSBA is going to publish findings from the first inventory of facility conditions for all public schools in Massachusetts since 2016. This board has the authority to analyze these data and determine which schools aren't meeting modern day minimum standards and work with communities and the MSBA to address these situations with the level of urgency that they merit. Secondly, I think it's critical to consider how the policies you make create the conditions to further school integration and by extension more equitable access to adequate school facilities over the long term. For example, early college magnet high schools have exceptional power to create integrated learning environments.
30 seconds, please.
A dozen years ago, I worked on a strategy with Gateway City mayors and superintendents to make early college a force for integration in Massachusetts. But the Massachusetts Early College Initiative has yet to recognize and embrace this opportunity. If integration were an explicit part of the state's early college strategy, the MSBA could work with the legislature and help school districts build wall-to-wall early college magnet high schools. So I think that's just one of the many ways that policies could promote economic integrations in schools and create sort of the political economy and conditions that we're going to need to ensure that all students have access to safe and effective school facilities in Massachusetts. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming in to speak. Chris Fisicella, and after Chris, the final speaker will be Tyrone Mowat.
Good morning, Chris Fisicella. My ex-wife lied to the police, so I reviewed the DCSE core guidelines and wanted to see how I could help the school. And I found a parent night that I thought I could attend. So at the parent night in Foxborough, I rang the doorbell to the school and they let me in. I went to the principal's office, I signed in, telling them I was going to work on the play. And then I went back to the auditorium and there were like 4 or 5 adults on the stage with one kid, but her parent was right there. And they had me hold a piece of cardboard, which I did. And then the principal came in, asked me to leave, and I left. So there was no direct and unmonitored contact with children, and I was not being unruly, and they had no right to ban me from this event. So this past Monday, they banned me from the set strike party, and the strike party is really for the kids. The adults actually tear down the. This is the only exhibit. I gave you exhibits before. But this is the most recent exhibit. But they really, I think they're a little out of control. I appeared a couple months ago to have them review their core regulations because they're not compliant with MGL 7138R. And when they recklessly request core records, they're breaking the law, and as a result, criminal applications are being filed pretty routinely now. So if you could please just provide a decision, yes or no, on my last appearance, I think that'll help everybody out quite a bit. And what I'll do is try to change the core guidelines, and I think things will be a lot more settled there. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming in to speak. Final speaker is Tyrone Mowat.
Forward. Good morning, Chair Craven, Vice Chair Hills, Secretary Tutwiler, Commissioner Martinez, and members of the board. As I prepared to deliver these comments, I reflected on 15 years of advocacy coming before this board to speak about the needs of academically advanced and artistically gifted students from across the Commonwealth. I remember clearly addressing the board in 2010, Maura Banta as chair, Mitchell Chester as commissioner, asking for a broader focus for DESE to include our most talented but invisible students of color languishing in dysfunctional, slow-growth schools throughout the state. In that meeting, I was promised actions would be taken and my calls for educational justice and excellence were supposedly heard, but almost no action was taken. 9 years later, in 2018 and 2019, I spoke again to the board, this time addressing incoming Commissioner Riley, asking for reforms of DESE, which had become the closed, walled-off, siloed organization, and asking again to address the needs of the gifted and advanced students that were languishing in schools that did not see these students as capable of advanced work and therefore provided them with none. As you consider the budget today, consider the results so far as I've presented. I have provided some data for you to review. The question that should be asked is funding K-12 education in the same manner as it has always been funded going to produce different results in the future. Perhaps if we look at funding education as investment in the Commonwealth's economic future, we would invest more wisely, gauging our investments for return and impact and placing strategic bets on finding ways to break the cycle of this downward decline. Perhaps it is time for new think beyond the traditional educational approach that simply takes last year's budget and increases it for inflation and stakeholder demands. Maybe it's time that the budget priorities and process itself be better understood so that investments will yield a much better return, not in dollars, but in the prosperity of the Commonwealth's future generation, a return that will provide the Commonwealth's future entrepreneurs and innovators with a highly skilled, globally competitive workforce ready to compete with any region of the country and any country in this highly competitive global marketplace. Maybe we would see something different in the children we often take for granted if we knew our economic futures depended on their educational success. But unfortunately, 80% of Black and brown children in the Commonwealth cannot read at grade level. This board is my last hope as I plead for families across the Commonwealth looking for accessible summer and after-school programming for their advanced children to receive, remediation or acceleration. Massachusetts has one of the largest excellence gaps in the nation. What is the budget priority to address this? Those that control the data control the narrative. The excellence gap is very real and getting wider. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming in to speak. So before we get to comments from the Secretary and Commissioner, we have one of our members here that we need to offer a wonderful congratulations to, Mary Ann. That would be you. Mary Ann has received the honor of being appointed as a life member of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. The life membership honors individuals who have made significant contributions to the School Committee Association through their service as board members, officers, committee members, representatives on statewide committees and task forces, which probably covers, several of those things probably cover things that you've done. We're thrilled for Mary Ann's, your service being recognized. We look forward to all the things you continue to do here and as a member of the board. And I want to say that you have one of these unusual things kind of as a member here where, like Catherine, you were first appointed by Governor Patrick, served through Governor Baker's administration, and are now on your fourth gubernatorial term and third governor.
That's right.
So congratulations on everything.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you. And, you know, it really is, it's an honor, you know, to be acknowledged this way and to be among dedicated peers with MASC. supporting public education, and they acknowledged so much of my work, as you say, but, you know, as president of the Massachusetts PTA, as chair and member of the Lexington School Committee, and going back as far as Mass Partners for Public Education, which was an advocacy group that met monthly for many years, and I chaired that group for several years. So anyway, it was really, it's an honor. I'm very humbled. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
So next, we'll have comments from Secretary Tutwiler, and after Secretary, the Commissioner.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Hope everyone is well. I will be brief this morning, and if I can humbly do so, I'd just like to call out and appreciate the artwork that is on the wall and that was on sort of a moving cycle on the PowerPoint as we came in. It's really quite beautiful, and I don't know who to thank for that, but thank you, whosever idea that was. We spend a great deal of time taking up, discussing, debating, as the case may be, policy issues tied to learning and development, as well as what we would call related factors. I think we would all agree that chief among the related factors is what we would define as the hierarchy of need. That is housing stability, access to physical, mental, and behavioral health supports, and food security. Without question, the extent to which these needs are substantively met directly impacts learning outcomes. Food security has been an issue front and center over the past 50 days or so with the government shutdown and deep concerns about SNAP benefits. I think we can all breathe a collective sigh of relief that the government has reopened and those benefits have begun to flow again. I am proud and appreciative of all the efforts to ensure that families had access to meals, even in the face of a government shutdown. Notably, Governor Healy has established an anti-hunger task force. This was a task force that was established before the government shutdown and is working substantively to develop sustainable solutions for addressing food security for so many families who are experiencing it across the state. As part of the development strategy, a set of listening sessions have been scheduled. I invite all to visit mass.gov and enter anti-hunger in the search field for a list of those sessions. There's a virtual one tomorrow evening. I am equally proud of the fact that Massachusetts is one of 9 states that offer universal free breakfast and lunch in all of its public schools. While this is important on its own, I would like to highlight that there are districts that are engaging really promising practices to ensure that participation is robust. The Springfield Public Schools is one of those districts. Last week, we had an opportunity to visit and see firsthand the thoughtful strategy that results in that district having the highest breakfast participation in the state. There, 87% of students access breakfast each and every day. They employ the breakfast in the classroom strategy. It's working and having impact. As we continue to make progress toward and beyond pre-pandemic academic performance, surely the quality and substance of what's happening in the classroom plays a significant role, but we also need to be mindful of absenteeism and all of the factors involved with the hierarchy of need that contribute to it. When we pair strong classroom instruction with unwavering attention to the hierarchy of need, inclusive of food security, we create the conditions for every student to show up, engage, and succeed. That is all, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Secretary Tutwiler. Commissioner Martinez.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hill and Secretary Tutwiler, for your comments. I'm going to first start speaking about 2 great events we have, board members and community, on December 2nd and 3rd. I'm excited that we will be elevating best practices as we look at districts and schools that are having academic success, and that's taking place on December 2nd and 3rd. So we had 63 districts who had pre-pandemic level achievement or hit their pre-pandemic levels of achievement either in math or reading or in both subjects. And we also had 97 schools across the Commonwealth that also, actually in both subjects of ELA and math, that hit their pre-pandemic levels. And so we're going to be celebrating the districts and schools on December 2nd and 3rd. These are just elementary and middle schools, and so it's grades 3 to 8. These are full-day conferences that will provide opportunities to not only celebrate and elevate the success across the Commonwealth, but it'll give teams to give the abilities for their teams to share best practices, strategies that have helped them get to that level of achievement. We're excited to learn from these communities, and as I've said publicly, this is not the goal, board members, but it's one of our foundational goals, because from there we can build. Second, I'm excited to announce that just yesterday, we opened the registration for our Literacy Launch Institutes that will take place this school year. Any educator who works with students in grades pre-K to 3 can sign up to attend these institutes and learn more about evidence-based literacy instructional practices. Board members, the registration for our summer institutes will open later this year, but I can tell you last year we had so many individuals that were interested, our slots filled up almost immediately. So I'm excited that this year, between these sessions that are coming up and next summer, we will have 1,300 slots, more than double what we did last year. And my guess is our literacy team will tell you that we could probably double that number as well. So just the demand that we're getting from our teachers. To register for these institutes, please visit the literacylauncinstitutes.org. So that's on our website, literacylauncinstitutes.org. And then, as the secretary said, now you're seeing it on your screens, and as you can see, we have, I think Lynn was your former district secretary. I want to acknowledge the beautiful artwork that is displayed in the boardroom today. This is in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month. We had artwork submitted from students across the Commonwealth. You can see the names of the artists presented on the slide behind me and around the room. I want to thank all the artists for creating and submitting artwork to celebrate this important month, and I want to especially thank their teachers and families for encouraging their creativity. My 11-year-old, soon to be 12, she could spend doing art every single hour. I mean, that is her happy place, and so every time I see art, I just think about her. The next item I want to just acknowledge, and it was mentioned earlier, we are celebrating 50 years of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. This is the 50th anniversary, and it's, of course, the federal law that transformed education and improved the lives of millions of students with disabilities and their families. And with that, everybody, I'll say this, we still have a ways to go, but I think it's important to acknowledge this important moment. It was modeled on the landmark special education law that was enacted in Massachusetts in 1972, 3 years earlier. So I think we have sort of this track of being ahead of the game right here in our Commonwealth. The IDEA established foundational principles that guide our work today: free and appropriate public education, individualized education programs tailored to each student's needs, education in the least restrictive environment alongside peers, and meaningful family participation in educational decisions. And I know for our teachers, I know this is easier said than done. I know there's a lot of complexities. But over the last 5 decades, we've evolved from simply providing access and focusing on outcomes and high expectations. Massachusetts has been a leader in inclusive practices supporting students with disabilities to graduate, pursue post-secondary education, and participate in their full communities. A couple of weeks ago, I had the opportunity to join the special education leaders across the state at the Administrative Special Education Conference to mark this important decision. And just last week, members of our team joined the Massachusetts Association of Approved Special Education Schools at their celebration and recognition of this milestone. While we celebrate this progress, we recognize again that there's still much work to do, but our commitment continues to be to provide equity and to continue to strengthen these services for the next 50 years. And then finally on line 5, or item 5, I just want to give everybody an update on the Southbridge Public Schools and Lawrence Public Schools. I've completed my review of the Lawrence and Southbridge Public Schools and determined that the turnaround plans will be renewed. We have shared this with all the constituents of both Lawrence and Southbridge. The renewed turnaround plans will be in place in effect for up to 3 years. During this period, my team will be working closely with the local school committees in each of the communities to build a capacity for local governance. That's really what we want them. We want to be able to strengthen their local governance. And again, I just want to thank everybody, and I'll turn it back to Vice Chair Hill.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. So I think we need Helene to come up to take a roll call for the minutes. We need to approve the October 28th minutes. Is there a motion, and then any comments or questions or changes?
Moved. Second.
Farzana, seconded by Erica. Any comments? Okay, go
Okay.
for it, Helene.
Okay, good morning. I'm going to call the roll in alphabetical order by last name. So starting with Member Chamberlain,
Yes.
Member Fisher,
Yes.
Member Grant,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hills,
Yes.
Member Mohammed,
Yes.
Member Hasha.
Yes.
I don't believe Member Smitty has joined yet, correct? Not yet, okay. Member Stewart?
Aye.
Member West?
Yes.
Chair Craven?
Yes.
And Secretary Tutwiler?
Yes.
Thank you.
Excellent. Minutes are approved. So the first item of new business on the agenda will be the budget guidelines that Farzana is chair of the committee for. So do you have anything you want to say to start?
Yes, Vice Chair. So again, I want to just thank our board member for leading this committee. So I want to, again, our board committee was led by Chair Farzana Mohammed, and before I turn it over to her, I just want to describe a little bit of the budget process, because, board members, this is new for me, and I know it's new for some of our board members. So the state budget cycle runs from July 1st to June 30th. It's a very highly structured timeline that requires the board to act right now in the fall so that you can influence next year's funding and budget. In the fall, the board engages in a budget development, including forming a budget committee, discussing priorities, and voting to adopt budget priorities, which you're doing this month. This November vote is a small but critical step in the process that allows us to meet statutory timelines and enables me, as the commissioner, to convey the budget priorities to our secretary and to the governor and to the legislature. From December to January, the governor develops the budget proposal, which is House Bill 2 this year, incorporating input from education agencies, considering revenue projections, and then the governor submits her budget to the legislature in January. The legislature then takes action from February through June with the House Ways and Means releasing their budget in April, the Senate in May, and a conference committee reconciling the differences in June. The final budget then goes to the governor for signature, typically in July. We will continue to update you throughout this process and appreciate the discussion today and around the proposed priorities, around our proposed priorities, and hopefully for you to consider for your vote today. And Board Member Farzana.
Thank you, Commissioner Martinez. I'm going to just provide a very brief summary because you all should have received last week a memo outlining the discussions of the Board Budget Committee. So very briefly, as Commissioner Martinez has stated, and as I think we've discussed before, the lion's share of the budget is appropriated by the state legislature for very specific buckets that are allocated according to formulaic principles. The remaining portion that's discretionary is then subsequently allocated among the commissioner's priorities that the board has input on. And in this year, just very big picture, are engaging in the literacy launch initiatives, sort of the continuation of that, comprehensive support for high-needs schools, developing a diverse educator workforce, and finally, ensuring that we're enhancing access to early college programs and career technical education. We also, in addition, discussed the importance of high-dosage tutoring, really supporting rural schools, and funding to offset some major federal grant reductions in the school year. And with that, I think I will turn things over to Associate Commissioner Bill Bell to kind of give us a fuller understanding and answer any questions. And of course, we welcome board members' further engagement.
Good morning, everyone. Just building upon the commissioner's comments and the Budget Committee Chair, Member Mohammed's comments, we are actively working in concert with the Executive Office of Education, the Governor's Fiscal Office, Executive Office for Administration and Finance, to develop a blueprint certainly direction from the board as it relates to priorities where we can influence further investment that's beyond the formulaic process that, or accounts that Member Mohammed speaks to. This is perfect timing for that. As just the one point on Member Mohammed's statement, the issue as it relates to federal reductions would be contingent at the moment. We have all of our key entitlement funding right now from the federal government for this school year. We're watching with close eyes to what the Congress and the administration does in DC as it relates to finalizing its federal fiscal year 26 budget, which is from last October, a month and a half ago till next September. That's the spending authority that will govern our distribution of federal entitlement funds for next school year. If you will, the federal government forward funds in education, forward funds education spending. So, remains to be seen. Obviously, there was some, Secretary Tutwiler referenced the sigh of relief as it related to SNAP benefits, but that also has other funding in it. It provides full funding for this school year's nutrition programs, which is a good thing. State legislature continues to support universal free meals, and the supplemental budget that's going to get before the governor soon, there's funding to pay. There was a small deficiency in that area. Closing out fiscal 25, there's funding to make all of those claims whole. So once signed into law, we'll be making some additional payments beyond the funding we have this year. So I guess my point on the federal side is it's very much a watch and be ready to react. The governor and her team certainly understand that. We're not the only area of spending where the federal government potentially could create stress in state and local governments' budgets. So, but I'm happy to just support the board in any questions or things of interest they may have. I just as our biggest area of spending, as you know, some of the folks who testified referenced the Student Opportunity Act, the investment of further state aid, just so for where we are in the law, the implementation of the law. State 27, is designed to be the last year of the implementation of the increased rates that were called for in the 2019 law. There was basically a series of increased rates for different student needs, whether they be special education, low-income students, English language learners. There were also changes in the circuit breaker law that increased basically what the state would contribute beyond to what that local extraordinary cost is. So it remains to be seen. The plan for us is we are in the process of finalizing enrollment figures. Districts need to certify their enrollments to us. That process is happening. Once that full certification is done, our school finance team will move forward to calculate what the last year cost of implementing those rates would be, and that will serve as the basis for discussion with the legislature. And that will be the single biggest driver of our increased spending. The items that, the topical areas that Member Mohammed spoke to, 3 of them are basically continuations of investments. Literacy launches. This would be the 3rd year of the 5-year program the governor announced a few years back. Obviously, the Commonwealth, in partnership with the Executive Office, Department of Higher Education, and other folks involved in the early college world have been very much invested in providing more opportunities there. So that would be, a continuation and investment. And we, with the support of the board and other folks, including legislative folks and schools of higher education as well, we've been working on a diverse workforce initiative, and that would continue with some further investment. And obviously, the commissioner, as I spoke to, really joining in partnership with local school districts to look at ways we can provide funding married with local funds to increase outcomes for students, provide better, better opportunities to increase learning. So that's what we spoke to as a board. We're just one last item. It's gotten a fair amount of public interest. We were charged this year by the legislature with conducting studying a topic within the Chapter 70 formula, particularly as it relates to the local contribution side of the formula. So we're in the process of doing the staff work to do the analysis, but a key component of that was going to host public hearings. We're having 5 public hearings, in-person hearings, and 1 virtual. We've conducted 3 of the 5 in-person hearings to date. We started on the 23rd of October in Boxford at Masconomet Regional. We went to Doherty Memorial High School in Worcester on the 30th of October. We're in Greenfield last Thursday night, 2 Thursdays ago, pardon me, the 6th of November. The virtual hearing is this evening, later this afternoon, 4 to 7. Anyone's welcome to join. And we'll be in Lakeville tomorrow at Apponequet Regional High School, and we round out the 5th on the 3rd of December. Member Hills, it's a home game if you're interested at Newton North High School.
Well, I guess I'll be there.
Anyway, just a quick update there. So available to support the board discussion. Member Mohammed.
Go ahead, Erica.
So I'm looking at the Teach Tomorrow as well as the comprehensive supports for high need schools. And it may or may not be a budget or a policy, but the possibility of linking those two in some way. If we're looking at diversifying the teacher workforce with highly qualified folks, getting them into those high needs districts are probably the most important step we can do. And I'm not sure, but I thought, so I know we have federal funds for repayment of loans, et cetera, as we're trying to think about diversifying the educator pipeline. I believe Massachusetts has a program, but it's only for students who've graduated from state institutions. So thinking about that to expand the talent base and looking at that in some way with some qualifications that they actually go into our high needs schools is something that's just at the top of mind.
Yeah, so I think Board Member Fisher, these were priorities that, that we wanted to provide to the board and provide to the Secretary's office, but they're all interconnected, because all the work that we do here in the agency really has an equity lens. So whether it's our early college programs, as we think about career tech pathways, and we think about, expanding them to students, especially in some of the communities where, there's just such a high demand and there's not enough seats for them. And as we go deeper in supporting our schools that are just struggling, we know some of the schools are going to be struggling with just teacher pipelines. Just being able to attract and to keep teachers. So it's all interconnected, board members. The state has a very specific process of how we do the budget, and so we have to submit it in individual lines. But absolutely, when we bring these plans together, board members, you'll see the connection of all the plans together.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions? The hope is we'll vote on this. Go ahead, Marianne.
Yeah, so I think, well, obviously, running schools is hard work for them to be successful. And, we've seen how the U.S. administration is really challenging that through various strategies, I guess. So I started doing a little digging into Massachusetts-specific data on student mental health and understanding and considering the overlapping thematic areas. When we consider high dosage tutoring, obviously we don't know all the conditions that students are bringing. We're going to look at some of this attendance data, and we don't know all the insight there either. But considering how many districts apply for grants and like how much money is available, looking at how many receive funds, whether they're exhausted annually. I wrote a few notes here, so I'm going to read from here. And what advocates are proposing as alternatives, and I think especially given the significant increase in student mental health. Also, a number of students are being evaluated for special education services for this specific issue. And so what I've come to understand really is that the mental health, student mental health is funded through the competitive grants that we have on the website, which are widely seen as inequitable because they demand consistently exceeding, the demands consistently exceed the supply. Funds are exhausted each year. Districts with stronger administrative capacity often win out, and advocates argue for formula-based or entitlement-style funding. I think there are probably other models we could look at, but my primary question is, why is student mental health why are districts competing for money? And I recognize that, the department has a competitive grant, it's up on the website, you can apply, and that the Healy Driscoll administration actually allocated, $5.5 million to 60 districts, but we have way more districts than that. So why is this under a competitive grant when the need is so big? And because of that, I realize the board, we have a lot of new members now, but we really haven't had a dive into this topic in a while. I wouldn't, if we can, whatever, we need to see more about this issue going forward, but if we can tuck anything into the budget this year, that would be amazing. But just considering that, why is it a competitive grant? Why are we doing it that way? I mean, year after year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just say, and I'll leave the competitive grant question to the commissioner, but I will say this related to that. You want to ensure that districts have the systems and structures set up already that will allow those grants to, or at least the orientation to allow those grants to have the impact that they're designed for. Some districts still need to do some readiness work before they're in a place to receive those funds. I'd also say that those competitive grants are not the only funding stream that impact the mental health challenge, right? If I go back to my superintendent days in Lynn, where we were able to achieve the national recommendation for the ratio of social worker to student, one for every 250 students using our Student Opportunity Act dollars. And I know that there are a number of other districts who have leveraged those dollars in the effort to address mental health challenges. I know this because there are about 1,300 social workers who were hired in Massachusetts over the past few years. So I would just name that I'm not dismissing at all the concern about, why are these dollars only being offered in a competitive environment? But I'd say that there are other funding streams that are having significant impact on the mental health challenge. I'll lastly say that so FY25, there was $5 million allocated by the legislature to help us develop a statewide framework for mental health from birth through higher ed, to help us sort of answer the big questions of what are our aligned, sort of definitions of what the challenge are. What are the best practices that we want to continue to seed more deeply? And how do we know, what are the data sources that we want to bring to bear on our understanding of what the challenge is and how it's getting better based on our investments? And so that work is also underway, and that's separate and apart from the competitive grant scheme.
Yeah, no, I'll just reinforce what the Secretary said. If there's one thing that's interesting about our Commonwealth is, first of all, at the local level, there's just a lot of variance, especially when it comes to funding streams. So you have high poverty districts that, because of the Student Opportunity Act, has become more of an equalizer in terms of at least increasing funding to a better level. I wouldn't say it's enough, but at least a better level. You have districts that, because of just locally, they've raised their own taxes, and they're significantly, because I started studying this with our finance team, significantly above their minimum contributions. I mean, significant, and kudos to them. They've been able to do it, and they do it. And so then you have districts in the middle that don't get the full benefits of our Student Opportunity Act funding, don't have the local wealth. And so In essence, the way for us to identify those districts, and then also that they have the structures to take advantage of the resources. So that's really the short answer. I would also say, we know that, as the secretary said, at the local level, between different funding streams, some districts are able to put that in place, and they have also foundational support, they have philanthropic support. So I think it's just us going deeper, board member. I think what I'm hearing from you is really going deeper and looking at the school districts where the needs are at, because as I've shared, in public, certain parts of the state, there's a wealth of community resources, and the other parts of the state there isn't. And so I think it's us just really identifying those districts so that we can make it easier for them to either access our funding or just even, identifying the need so that we can help them get the resources somehow.
Yeah, it seems like the need is universal. So if you really can dissect down like that, amazing. But I think the model forces districts to really compete for limited funds. And, it pits those districts that have the structure, whatever, to get the funding year over year when the funds are exhausted year over year. It seems like there should be a better way. That's all. I'm raising this as an issue for all of us to take on as a board, to look at the policy, to look at the structure, and reconsider going forward. And maybe next year we can have something a little more plugged in for the budget going forward. Thank you.
Kristen?
Thank you. I completely agree with you, Marianne. I think that there are these systems in place that kind of promote inequity if there's not a way to ensure that schools that need it can access it. And if you know me at all, you knew this was coming, but I just want to point out that there already have been studies that demonstrate that there are specific schools that are already at a disadvantage, such as rural schools. So the Rural School Coalition have done a study and say that rural schools need $60 million allocated to them in order to have the base level programming that some of their counterparts receive. So, competitive grants aside, rural schools don't get any SOA money. And so there are already systems in place that point out where some inequities are, and they're not being funded the way they should. So I think that there's many areas that we could take a look at in order to promote equity across the state, so all of our students can have the supports that they need. Because I know that, my rural school counterparts are not hiring mental health workers. They're laying off loads of teachers. And as a note, they just found out how much rural aid they got, which went down from last year. And so there are layoff conversations happening right now because of the way that that is funded. So thank you.
Other comments or questions? I have one comment I'll make, and it's just a comment. It's not a question. Let me just see. Delita, do you? No. Okay. I recognize it is a massive state budget, and I'm sure your favorite part of the job, Secretary Tutwiler, is when you're battling it out over kind of allocate. I'm sure this is not going to be a particularly fun year or next few years. The only comment I'll make is there are enormous needs that outstrip, under the best of times, the available funding. I get that. And the needs are increasing while funding may or may not even be the same, let alone increase. And there are certain items out of the many billions spent on education by the state, there are certain items that are tiny fractions of the total that are at the margin incredibly high value added. So I understand there's not one pot of money for education and you two get to collaborate and I understand all that. There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen and the sausage making is particularly, pleasant, I'm sure. But some of these items, if you had to prioritize and pick and choose, are so high value added, at the margin are so impactful. And some of these are listed here, whether it's literacy or the high dosage tutoring. I would hope that if trade-offs had to be made, the trade-offs were made based on the highest impact given our key priorities. It's not the only thing that determines how these things are made, but that would be a shame if this big formula that spits out all sorts of money prevents this from happening, so.
We'll take.
Any other comments, questions? If we're ready to vote on it, is there a motion? Helene comes up, so motion by Marty, a second?
Second.
Second by Farzana, the Budget Subcommittee Chair. Go for it, Helene.
Okay, great. Once again, I'll call the roll in alphabetical order by last name. Member Chamberlain?
Yes.
Member Fisher?
Yes.
Member Grant?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hills?
Yes.
Member Mohammed?
Yes.
Member Hasha?
Yes.
Member Smitty?
Yes.
Member Stewart?
Aye.
Member West?
Yes.
And Chair Craven?
Yes.
Secretary Tutwiler?
Yes.
Okay,
I think we're going to need to abstain.
Excellent.
thank you. Motion carried.
This one.
Two agenda items left. The first will be a vote to send something out for public comments, and the second will be on the staff attendance data. I think both will be introduced by our commissioner.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hill. The next item today is the proposed amendment to the regulations for educator licensure and the preparation program for approval. The proposed amendments will create an alternative licensure pathway consistent with state law enacted in 2024 that allows an applicant for licensure to waive one of two tests that comprise the Massachusetts Test for Educator Licensure, or MTEL. Today, I'm recommending that the board vote to solicit public comment on the proposed amendments, anticipating a final vote by the board in March of 2026. And school board members, we're trying to give as much time as possible for public input. I would like to invite to the table our team: Clara Abbott, the Director of Educator Effectiveness; Brian Devine, Director of Educator Licensure; Liz Lozee, Director of Educator Effectiveness Policy; and Lucy Wall from our legal staff.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for inviting us here today, and thank you for the introduction, Commissioner Martinez. We're here to talk through proposed amendments to our preparation and licensure regulations related to a new pathway to licensure, as well as some more technical amendments to clarify subject matter knowledge requirements and some definitions. Pending an affirmative vote from members of the board, these proposed amendments will then go out for public comment for a period of 60 days. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Brian Devine, Liz Lozee, and Lucy Wall, all of whom contributed to these proposed changes and are here to answer any clarifying questions. So this is a brief overview of our presentation today. First, I will walk through the context for these proposals, in particular, the alternative licensure pathway, which came out of recently passed legislation to advance a more diverse workforce. I will also share a bit about stakeholder engagement that informed these proposals before turning it over to Liz to provide an overview of the proposed amendments themselves and related next steps. We will conclude with time for comments and questions. So here is an overview of the amendments to the regulations that we are proposing to you today. There's new language in 603 CMR 704, which outlines the new alternative licensure pathway that would allow an educator candidate to waive the communications and literacy skills test or a subject matter knowledge test. Related changes include updates to the definitions section, as well as changes to the administrator and professional support personnel licenses and the ad license provision, which are all in service of the new alternative licensure pathway. We have some other amendments that are separate from the alternative licensure pathway that Liz will talk through at the conclusion of this presentation. But I'm going to start with the proposed new licensure pathway with some important background. So as many of you are aware, back in November of 2024, Governor Healy signed into law the Massachusetts LEADS Act, which is a comprehensive economic development package intended to promote job growth through equity, opportunity, and innovation in numerous sectors throughout the Commonwealth, including but not limited to life sciences, climate tech, small businesses, and education. Section 300D of the Act charges DESE, subject to board approval, with developing a new pathway for qualified candidates to become licensed educators in Massachusetts. The goal is to further diversify and expand access to the profession at the very beginning of the pipeline by creating an additional pathway to licensure that would allow an aspiring teacher to waive one licensure assessment, or MTEL, while maintaining a high bar for licensure. Eligibility requirements for waiving a licensure assessment could include, but are not limited to, things like prior experience, a related master's degree, completion of an approved Massachusetts educator preparation program, or certification from another state. So in Massachusetts, most licenses currently require passing at least 2 or more licensure assessments, one in communications and literacy skills and one in subject matter knowledge. For example, somebody who wants to become an 8th grade math teacher must take the communications and literacy skills test and the 5-8 or 8-12 math test. An individual who wants to become an elementary school teacher must take the communications and literacy test, the general curriculum test, and the Foundations of Reading test. These tests could be one of our MTELs, or per this board's approval last spring, an approved alternative assessment where available. Regardless of whether it's an MTEL or an approved alternative, each assessment is carefully designed to test the specific skills and competencies and content knowledge needed to be successful in the classroom. And we have research showing that they are predictive of an educator's effectiveness with students. That said, they can act as a barrier to entry, particularly for some educators. And the proposed pathway per the LEADS Act would allow some individuals who already meet specific eligibility criteria to waive one of these assessments. So our goal in developing this new pathway was similar to how we approached the development of the alternative assessments, to expand access to the profession while maintaining rigorous standards for licensure. And thanks in large part to research on the MTEL alternative assessments over the last 5 years, we also have confidence that there can be other ways to show knowledge, assuming alignment to our requirements are maintained. So the question that we sought to answer was, what specific criteria or experiences are comparable to an MTEL or an approved alternative assessment, and signal the presence of similar competencies, such that you could waive one of these assessments. I'm going to turn it over to Liz in a moment, and she will talk you through the proposed pathway itself. But first, I want to briefly discuss the stakeholder engagement that informed this recommendation. So after passage of the LEADS Act, we immediately launched the process of soliciting input and feedback on proposed options for an alternative licensure pathway. Using the legislative language as a guide, we partnered with key stakeholder groups, both within DESE and outside of DESE, to develop a pathway that would be responsive to the needs of aspiring educators while still adhering to the high standards of the profession itself. Over the course of several months, we surveyed and met with school and district leaders, teachers, educator preparation program leadership, and faculty, and representatives from key stakeholder groups, including Latinos for Education, teachers' unions, and representatives from administrators' associations. In total, over 200 stakeholders discussed and provided feedback on the proposals that we are bringing to you today, all with the shared goal of crafting a more accessible entry point into the profession while maintaining our commitment to high standards. I'm now going to turn it over to Liz to walk through the specifics of the proposed alternative pathway itself, as well as the additional amendments before you today.
Thank you. So as Claire described, the proposed alternative licensure pathway allows an educator to waive up to one MTEL based on meeting certain eligibility criteria. That means an educator can waive either the communication and literacy skills test or the subject matter knowledge test. I'm going to start with the options for the communication and literacy skills test, and then on the next slide we'll speak to the options for the subject matter test. So if a licensure candidate wants to waive the communication and literacy skills test, they must meet one of the following eligibility criteria. That includes completion of an approved program, or if they have a license from another state, complete a master's or doctorate from an accredited degree program, or have 2 years of field-based experience and a recommendation from their school or district leader. So those would be the options for waiving the communication and literacy skills test. Moving on to the subject matter knowledge test, candidates would be able to waive the assessment by demonstrating their Massachusetts-specific content knowledge through the completion of a portfolio, which will be designed in alignment to the test objectives for the license sought. We have a good model for this in our competency review process that is used when no MTEL or alternative assessment is available. So for example, the library license, there is no MTEL, and so a candidate would demonstrate their content knowledge through a competency review. In order to be eligible to submit a portfolio in lieu of a subject matter knowledge test, a candidate would have to meet one of the following prerequisites, which are similar to the options I just described for the communication and literacy skills MTEL. And these include completion of an approved educator preparation program, and that would be in the field of the license sought, a license from another state, again, in the field of the license sought, a master's or doctorate from an accredited degree program in the field of the license, 2 years of field-based experience in the role and at the level of the license sought with a letter of recommendation from their school or district leader, or the passing of a subject matter test from another state, again, in the field of the license sought. So an example of this is, if you remember that 8th grade math teacher that Claire described earlier, with this new pathway, if that candidate, that math candidate, had 2 years of experience teaching math in a middle school on an emergency license, they could be eligible to submit a portfolio of work in lieu of taking that math MTEL based on those 2 years of experience. So that's just an example of someone who could be eligible and what pathway they might take based on that previous experience. I also want to note that our 2 literacy-specific assessments are not eligible to be waived in any manner. Those include the Foundations of Reading and the Reading Specialist assessments. As we built the alternative licensure pathways into regulations, there were several sections that needed to be modified to support the implementation. These included new and revised definitions in section 7.02, adding the option of waiving the communication and literacy skills test for administrator and professional support personnel, allowing the option for the alternative licensure pathway for educators looking to add a license when they already had a first license. And finally, we included language for a 5-year evaluation of the alternative licensure pathway in an effort to ensure that candidates who get licensed with this new alternative pathway are performing similarly to those earning their license using another licensure pathway already in place. These next set of changes are not specific to the new alternative licensure pathway. These include adding language for an 18-month implementation timeline when subject matter knowledge guidelines are updated. And then in a few places, we updated references in the regs, like using the pronoun there rather than he when speaking to the commissioner's designee in section 7.15. So we did that in a couple places throughout the regulations. So finally, our anticipated next steps are, with the board's approval, we'll begin accepting public comment on these proposed amendments to the regulations. Given the substantive changes we are proposing and the feedback from Vice Chair Hills at the last board meeting, we are proposing a 60-day public comment period through January 20th, 2026. Based on this timeline, we would come back to the board for a final vote at the March 24th board meeting. So with that, I will pause and open it up for questions. Thank you.
Questions, comments? It was very clear, so thank you. Mary Ann, go ahead.
Yeah, are we saying, I note that you focus on master's/doctorate programs a couple of times here. What does that speak, what does that say for bachelor's, students who are going through a bachelor program? Is that a provisional license? I forget what happens when they finish a program and are graduating.
So educator preparation programs can be completed at the baccalaureate or the post-baccalaureate level. So when we talk about completing an approved program, it could be completing a baccalaureate-approved preparation program.
Okay.
So if someone completed a program at Bridgewater State and it was a baccalaureate program, that could be used in lieu of a communication and literacy skills test. And then the master's or doctorate, that might be a master's in math that a candidate might use to meet that requirement.
And then, are there options for, so I'm thinking about the adult ed program here at the department, that we're work on, and so if somebody goes through that, but maybe they're still working on their English language or whatever, or do we have options for, like we do for students in K-12, for English language learners? Are there options for adults with special needs? Are there options for low income? I'm just wondering how it all intersects.
Yeah, so
Are we being consistent?
I mean, without knowing all the specifics associated with that, I think that when we look across the breadth of ways in which we're creating options for candidates to demonstrate what they know, we've got our current MTEL and our approved alternative assessments, which are, as the board approved, there's a variety of types of assessments that candidates can complete. And then this new pathway allows somebody to have other experiences, which I think then opens up, again, the pathways, as Claire described, for people to enter into the profession. So I think that it holds the line as far as what we would expect our educators to know and be able to do in order to be effective with students, at the same time creating different ways people can demonstrate that knowledge.
And then these would be approved at the department, through your department? I mean, is that where it happens in the licensure area?
It depends on the pathway, but yes, I mean, there are, like, Brian's office reviews the competency determinations, but the licensure requirements guide the application for licensure, and then it gets approved through Brian's office. I don't know if you'd add anything to that.
The communication literacy skills test, that will be approved in the licensure office. And then with the subject matter tests, an individual will go through the portfolio process, which will be conducted by an external vendor that gets approved by the department.
Oh, I see.
And then we'll get those scores submitted just like a traditional MTEL score that gets securely sent to us electronically. And then the results will appear in our ELAR system. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
Marty?
Thank you for the presentation and the work on this. This is more of an observation than a question. I'm just trying to think in my mind to compare the process of policy development here to what we just did over the past several years in thinking about alternative assessments for completing the 2 MTEL requirements. And in that case, we sort of approved a pilot alternative, right? And then we looked at the results under the pilot and had several updates on what the research partners were finding. And then we took action last fall, if I recall, to sort of make that pilot permanent. Here, it seems like we're going immediately to permanent, but you're commissioning a 5-year study, but you are shifting the default before we have the evidence. And just an interesting difference in approach. I'm more comfortable with the old approach than this one in some ways, but I also know that the contextual difference is we have a law that
That's the difference.
it's also a very interesting law in that it says we may do something, but then it is very specific about what we may do, and so we're in a little bit of an unusual situation. So, anyways, that's where we are.
Yeah, I think I'm starting to refer to that Member West as Massachusetts speak. It's kind of like a may, but it's more of a you need to do this kind of thing. But I do applaud the team of trying to find this balance, because what we don't want is we don't want to weaken our standards, and I've shared this with a few board members, I never want the narrative to be that we need to weaken our standards to allow more diversity in our teacher workforce. I just don't think that's true. I think there's a lot of things we can do to support, up and coming, teachers in our prep programs. We can work with our prep programs. I do think this is an interesting balance, Member West, around how we acknowledge actual experience and content, especially when it comes to graduate degrees, because we do have, as you know, I love going to our career tech academies and seeing individuals that have come from other professions, engineers, individuals in construction and those roles those individuals are so hard to get. So I think it's an interesting, we're trying to achieve a balance of how do we recognize some of those experiences and bring those to light, as well as in having them, really join our teacher workforce. So again, it's a balance.
I guess I would just conclude my remarks by saying I hope we take I really appreciate the inclusion of the evaluation requirement, and I think 5 years is an appropriate time frame, given what we learned about how long it took to see results in the last process. I hope we'll sort of take that seriously and that we won't just say, well, it's already in regulation and so we have to keep it in place, but actually use that as a learning and action opportunity.
Well, I have a lot of questions. Thank you. I share the commissioner's sentiment on not conflating wanting to make sure people who have a range of experiences have access to the profession, but I don't want to state that folks from diverse backgrounds can't meet the standard to teach in the Commonwealth, and I'm very sensitive about that. I think when we think about the requirements, I think it's too general to say license from another state, so I'd want to get a better understanding of which states to ensure that they have a licensure requirement that remotely comes close to what we are requiring folks to do, because licensure is a hot topic across the country right now. A master's or doctorate from the Commonwealth or same question applies. So not just that you have one, but where is it from? When we're thinking about the specific subject matter, a transcript review might be too extreme, but not just having the credential, but where is it from and does it meet a standard? And then just I would want to understand what would be in the portfolio if someone can write a letter of endorsement. How do we make sure there's teeth to the general statements? And then echoing what my colleagues shared about the 5-year review, I'm not sure what additional information we could get outside of a 5-year period to even understand how this is playing out. And then wondering procedurally, will we not hear about this again until March, or would there be an opportunity to understand what a recommendation could be at the February meeting in advance of a vote?
Yeah, so I think, board members, we would, again, the good news is we'll, take 60 days, receive a lot of feedback, and then we're giving ourselves enough time to be able to really analyze that feedback, share it with you, and then we can look at what the final recommendation would be in March. So of course, this is all just going for public comment. As you know, you can imagine, this is a very sensitive topic. We're going to get a lot of feedback on it. So we definitely want to make sure that that we can analyze that feedback for you, share it with you before we even come to you in March. So we will be talking about this before the March vote.
Thanks.
Let me make a suggestion. Go ahead.
You can go.
I want to make a suggestion based on what Christina said and Marty before her, because in general, I'm supportive of this, and by this I mean ways of building flexibility into the system without staying sort of rigidly to kind of a standard, if you can reach that standard in alternative ways. So there's nothing about this that kind of offends my sensibilities in any way. That's not a lower the standard comment. That's in other good ways of achieving the same standard. On the other hand, you've got, what you call the trade-off. I get that. And then you have the issues that Christina has raised. And if we don't have a chance to weigh in as a board before you come back in March on this or other things like this, then we have this kind of awkward situation where you've gone through the public comments. You're generally, I assume, not getting public comments from board members. And what are we doing? We're like voting to amend a final recommendation that takes into account public comments. I don't even know if that means you gotta send it out for public comments again. So my suggestion, this is not a specific game plan, is find a way well before you come to us with a final recommendation for board members to specifically weigh in a non-binding way so that members like Christina are not saying, yeah, I know we're ready to vote on it, but here's some changes that, could be reasonably substantive changes. And my suggestion is not board members should just be, kind of additional people submitting comments, because then, fine, so instead of 300, you have 310 comments. I don't know whether that means a February conversation. If that's too soon, it might mean a March conversation, we vote in April, and I don't understand the implications of that. What I'm saying is, you guys figure out how to get it done so we can weigh in before it's basically too late.
Yes, so board members, I'm always used to, especially in any sensitive topic, that shame on us if you're learning about it at the board meeting itself when you're having a vote on it. So count on us doing briefings, count on us, giving you an update as, once we get enough, again, once we get through the comment period, because I want to respect that, because that's a critical period, for those 60 days. So that's why I remember how we do give enough time between that comment period and the March board meeting. That gives us time to really both analyze it, have conversations with you, and then, like I said, if there's any problems, we can always adjust, the March date as well. But again, I think right now, we want to follow the process that the agency has, that really, and the board members have supported, which is give as much time, the 60-day period for comments. Let us, get that feedback. We'll analyze it, share it with you, and then if we're ready, we'll bring it for the March board meeting.
Just as a follow-up to that, I mean, here's the way I would operationalize that without adding meetings just for the sake of it. There should either be a preliminary conversation on this at the February meeting, may not be a long conversation, or, even in the, we hold the night before. And I'm not trying to create like a whole special process for this, except, this is actually a pretty critical issue. And this could also be a prototype for how we deal with other types of consequential regulatory changes going forward. Go ahead, Erica.
I'm going to echo and expand on what Member Grant said. I lead a department that has a TEP program in it, and not all educator prep programs are equal.
At all.
And from fundamental underlying philosophy of culturally sustaining and responsive pedagogy, and I am referring to approved programs within the Commonwealth, that there's disparity between them. So I have some concern. I'm trying to temper this because I understand, I also have the perspective of cost of these exams and everything. I see the big picture related to licensure. I do worry as the Commonwealth is looking to creating educators who have that cultural knowledge of the students that they're teaching, what this looks like for folks who are not going through certain educator prep programs. I'll also say that also makes me think about the review of TEP programs and the many years between reviews, so that if we institute this and then we have programs that haven't been reviewed for 7 years, they may not be doing what we need them to be doing before they get in front of the Commonwealth's children.
That's why it's like the teeth behind this is important. So educator programs that have been approved by X date to ensure that they had been reviewed before this comes into effect. Reviewing states' licensure requirements to ensure that they remotely mirror what we would be unilaterally waiving. And for members that don't know, there are many states in this country that are very specific about what other states can have their license count in their jurisdiction. So that's not a far outside the bounds question, but it's ensuring that in doing something that one could argue is right and will allow for more individuals to enter the profession, we're not creating a pathway that people could just bypass this process overall and have access.
Ms. Secretary?
No, but I thought
I'm
Member
sorry.
Smitty had her hand up, but it's since come down.
Delita or Kristen, do either of you have anything to add?
I guess I would just want to extrapolate on Dr. Grant and Dr. Fisher's points because I agree that there needs to be rigorous standards for our educators. I've also seen potential educators be blocked out of becoming educators because they had to pay for a transcript review, or the cost of the MTELs became significant. And so it's more to consider. And so if we go through the process that Vice Chair Hill described in terms of having a more robust conversation, I think these points can be elevated.
And that made me think of like the budget conversation we just had, because I don't see proactive supports. So cost shouldn't be a prohibitive factor if folks would be able to ask for waivers for the cost of the exam or preparation, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's worth a broader conversation.
Yeah, and remember, Grant, we did provide, so the legislature is considering what supports are possible. We did provide actual cost study for the legislature around supporting, the cost of exams, also support, preparation programs or for the exams or test prep, I guess. Reminds me a lot of when I had, some of our kids who would take test prep programs for GRE and GMAT, but, so we did share that with the legislature. So it is something that they're looking at, knowing that that is actually one of the challenges for some of our candidates.
I'll just add one thing aside from agreeing with what Dr. Fisher said and others. I just also want to raise the access to the field-based experience. I can see how that can become a problem for certain teachers. So folks, so I'm just like wondering what the access and who has access to those field-based experience. And also the 2 year, is it school calendar year or 2 full calendar year? School year calendar versus like the 24 months. Have a clarity on that as well.
It would be a school year, 2 school years.
I don't know, did you hear the answer, Delita? Okay.
Yes, school year. Thank you.
Farzana?
Sorry, I don't have a comment specific to this discussion, but I do think hearing my colleagues' comments, it would be really valuable for the board to understand what the department's work is regarding reviewing teacher prep programs, and just to make sure we all have the same baseline of understanding, so if we can have time during the retreat or perhaps one of these pre-board meeting sessions.
Absolutely. No, and this is definitely an ongoing conversation we're having, especially as we're seeing potential legislation that's coming up with, that could impact also teacher preparation programs. So absolutely, we can have that as a future discussion.
So before we vote, at the risk of piling on again, I'll just say, as you look at this, the objective is to come to the board with something that you're really confident, or you have no reason to think the board's not supportive of. I mean, the discussion can take place. It would be dysfunctional if we're changing all sorts of things at the meeting. There's real simple ways to avoid that, and let's just have the discussion. The objective is not to vote in March per se, it's to vote when we're ready to vote. Back up from when do you need to be comfortable, engage us. When we've had in the past, kind of disagreements that so easily could have been avoided, like there's no reason for it, and it's just, like I said, dysfunctional. So there's simple solutions here. You got a lot of comments from board members, so
And
look forward
Vice
to
Chair,
this.
just naming that we're putting this out for public comment through the holidays, and it will be very interesting if we receive a lot of advocacy that people didn't have the time to pay what was needed to it because the public comment closes at the top of the year.
We'll monitor, Member Grant, what the level of feedback is, and we'll definitely monitor any requests for like, hey, we need more time because of the holidays. I mean, we're trying to cover the holidays within, right? Because it's starting now, it's going through past New Year's. But again, we'll be sensitive to that as well.
If you want to extend, if you see you need to extend the time, do you need to come back to the board for that, or can we, in a motion, give you, delegate to you the right to extend the time? I mean, which I haven't really thought through kind of the consequences of that, but.
They're gonna have to be operationalizing the comment while, like, it's a both and, it's for them and for the public, that it's gonna go. That means at some point over December, you're gonna have to do your first wave, and then you're gonna have to prep to close it in January, and then prep to bring something to us. I'm just acknowledging that you all might want to.
It's a great procedural question, I guess, team. If we needed to extend the time, how does that work? The public comment period. If we needed to extend the public comment period, do we have to come back to the board, or can we do it on our own?
We can do it on our own.
Oh, okay. The commissioner can extend.
Okay, so I will act, board members, if I need to, if I see that we still need to extend the time. And of course, I'll be having conversations with you.
With that, is there a motion to approve a motion to send this out for public comments?
Moved.
Second.
You go ahead and pick, Helene. There's a whole range of people, starting with Marianne. Go ahead, you're up for the roll call.
Okay. Member Chamberlain?
Yes.
Member Fisher?
Yes.
Member Grant?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hills?
Yes.
Member Mohammed?
Yes.
Member Hasha?
Yes.
Member Smitty?
Yes.
Member Stewart?
Aye.
Member West?
Yes.
Chair Craven?
Yes.
And Secretary Tutwiler?
Yes.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Excellent. This is really good conversation also.
I was going to say, Vice Chair Hill, I really appreciate the thoughtfulness in this conversation, everybody. It's such an important topic. It really is. So thank you.
Good. Last item on the agenda is the data that the commissioner will take us through.
So our last item, and board members, this doesn't require a vote. This is just a discussion, but this marks the first time that the department is reporting attendance data for the district, school staff, administrators, and teachers, and we also have students. So I will ask Rob Curtin, our Chief Officer of Data and Assessment Accountability, to give us this presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, board members. Good to be with you again. So as the Commissioner just said, today, and actually about an hour and a half ago, we released for the first time the 2025 district and school staff attendance data. We have never released attendance data on staff throughout the Commonwealth before, and that data is currently live on our website. It was released this morning. I'm going to walk through a brief presentation for you, and happy to take any questions from you as well. Just going to give you a little bit of a background on the communication on this issue. We worked really hard with districts to get to this day, and I want to make sure that everybody has a clear understanding of the steps that we took. A little bit of background on the data itself, including which measures we're actually reporting, which measures we're not reporting. I'll give you a brief overview at the state level of very quickly of the state reported measures in terms of the results for the state, in terms of for staff, administrators, and teachers, and then just some considerations at the end to talk about when we think about how to use this data and how we're thinking about in terms of the future with this data. So back in February, we knew this would be something new for districts, so we wanted to make sure that we built a long runway, and this included through the tenure of interim commissioner at the time, Tutwiler, that we sent a notice to all districts that for the first time in February that we intended to publish this data. So we wanted them to know as they begin thinking about submitting this data to us that we were going to be publishing it.
right? So that it drew attention to how the quality of the data that they were submitting. As we started to see some of the data, we did some targeted outreach to districts that we had some data quality concerns. Thank you very much to our staff that spent hours working with districts and helping to clean up some of this data. Then this summer, we again reminded them as they were finalizing the data to us that we were going to be publishing this data this fall. And then we actually took the step of requiring, before districts could certify the data with us, they had to certify that they had actually looked at the reports. We actually calculated the data real time so that they could see it, and that they had to confirm that they had looked at the data prior to certifying the data with us. And then in October, we gave them one final crack at correcting the data, and then here we are today at the public release of the information for the first time. This data comes in through our Education Personnel Information Management System, affectionately known as EPIMS, and we collect two variables that are very similar to what we do for students. We collect the days attended and the days that were expected to be attended for each individual staff member that we collect in EPIMS. That universe includes just about all employees within a district. It does not include food service workers, coaches, and transportation employees if they are directly hired by the district. A lot of them are town or city employees, but generally speaking, it includes just about everybody that works for the school department in EPIMS. And again, this is the first time we're publishing it, and this is something that we plan to make part of our regular annual reporting, just like we do with many other reports. What exactly did we report today? So the reports that got released today include two measures: the attendance rates for at the teacher, administrator, and all staff levels, and the average number of absences at those three levels as well. Okay, so for each district and school, we have released two measures: attendance rate and average number of absences at three different levels. We were going to have another measure, and I want to thank our school districts for providing us feedback on this, that was going to be analogous to something we do with students, which is the percentage of, we report on the percentage of students that have missed more than 10 days of school. And our school districts rightfully raised that there are differing denominators for educators depending on the length of their school year and their contract. So that 10-day measure wouldn't be a fair thing to do across the board. As opposed to students who are all roughly on a 180-day schedule. So we scrapped that idea, and we did not release anything about percentage missing 10 or more days. The reports are available at the district and school level. As always, the schools include our charters, virtuals, vocational schools, and as for the state as a whole. And for this report, an absence is like for students, it's defined as missing more than half of the workday for a reason that falls outside of paid school vacation time or a district-approved professional development activity. Okay? And as usual, with all of our data releases, one of our highest priorities is to protect individuals' privacy. So the data are suppressed for any group that's smaller than 6 individuals, like a lot of our other reports that we release. Okay, here are the results that we have released today at the state level. So the first is for the attendance rate. Again, this is for the 24-25 school year. And you're going to see 4 bars here. We have added students in just for a comparative sake for you. So for the roughly 160,000 all staff across the Commonwealth, in 2024-25, the all staff attendance rate was 93.4%. For roughly 13,000 or 12,000 administrators, the attendance rate was 94.5%. For about 80,000 teachers, the attendance rate was 93.5%. And I have added the student in there, which was 93.2% for 24-25. So you're seeing pretty remarkable consistency there across. A note here, you'll notice that teachers plus administrators does not equal the all staff count. The reason for that is the all staff count includes administrative staff, support staff, paraprofessionals, and what have you. So what you see here is what's been released this morning in terms of the attendance rate for the different categories that we have. And in terms of the average days missed, this depends upon the difference in those two variables that I was reporting, that we collect. And you'll see roughly that we're reporting about 12 days that each of these categories missed. Administrators would probably round to 11, but roughly 12 days for all staff, administrators, teachers, and our students were also, the average student missed 12 days of school in the 24-25 school year as well. I did include this just to give you an idea of the range that districts were reporting, right, in terms of the average number of absences. And you'll see where the line gets pretty thick is right around that average number that I was talking to you about, right, in terms of 12. You can see there are some outliers. We will always continue to work with our districts on data quality. Some of this could be especially if you look in the administrators category where you see a couple of dots way up there. We did our best to get everybody to where we thought was an acceptable level of quality. There's always more work to do, and we'll continue to work hard to do that. But you can see here that the range is somewhere mostly between 0 and 20. At the administrative level, you'll see it creeps up a little bit above 20, for a few dots there. But this just gives you an idea. There is a range, but the average works out to around 12 when we think about the state number that we released today. When you look at schools, you're going to see, because you're dealing with smaller numbers of staff, right, you're going to see wider ranges here when talking about averages. But again, you're going to see the thickness of the line really come to play right around the average between 10 and around 10, 12, in between 10 and 20, basically. But again, some of these outliers here are things that we'll continue to work on in terms of data quality issues and make sure that we have the reporting guidelines set for everybody and everybody has a clear understanding of them. I just wanted to when we think about the importance of attendance at school, I think we can agree that there's nothing more important than students having access to not only teachers but all staff in their schools and all the services that our schools can offer. And I just have an illustration here of a potential impact, and there's a lot of nuance that goes on in here. But if you think about a typical 180-day school year, right, and if you have students missing an average of 12 days a year and you have teachers missing an average of 12 days a year, for example. Now, I know sometimes those days might overlap for some kids, right? The teacher and the student's out on the same day, but maybe there are kids where they're not out on the same day, right? Your 180-day school year where students have access to our amazing teachers for high quality instruction, that number of school days comes down. And that's really the combined effect of these attendance data when we've typically just thought about students. And what, in our Power of Presence campaign that we've been working on for a couple of years, it's really important that students have access to not only their teachers, but all staff. And for all the services that they can receive in those in school. It's important not only for students to be there, but for all staff as well. And the different stories here are told by different districts' data, and we've encouraged districts to look at their own data to be able to think about the meaning and to see if there's any trends that can be thought about. But just wanted to give a potential impact here. This is not necessarily what exactly happening, but it just shows you that as we think about elevating student achievement, right, and as we think about moving our students forward, the ability to have access to the staff is as critical as anything, in addition to the students being in school as well. Member Mohammed, did you have a question?
Yeah. So thank you for presenting this, and the averages are useful to see. Sure. But I'm wondering if you have a way to highlight within the data that's presented either to the board or to districts or to individual schools even, real outliers in terms of variances, because this kind of masks where you might have real entrenched situations.
Let me just share this because so Rob actually did 2 webinars with our superintendents. We also had a conversation with different stakeholders, and one of the questions that superintendents asked was, well, what does BESE want us to do with this data, right? Because I will tell you, this was not popular that we released all the data. And Rob answered it well, which is districts need to analyze this information to see what the impact is. And so, of course, we're more than happy to do the analysis, board member, but I think it's even more critical because, again, districts are at different places. You know, we have a lot of struggle across our Commonwealth in terms of student achievement. Very few districts hit their pre-pandemic levels. You know, very few schools in the scheme of the total number of schools in the Commonwealth have also hit their pre-pandemic level. So what we're hoping is to model to say, we have data. By the way, it's not all perfect, right? And kudos to Rob and the team to giving multiple opportunities for improvement. When you look at that schedule, I look at, I mean, if there was erroneous data, it wasn't like there wasn't multiple opportunities to correct it, because this data can be, it's a little tricky to sometimes to collect. So really that's what we want to do, Board members, is really, I wanted to be careful, and I shared this with the superintendent. I didn't want us to be making editorial comments about this, because what I really want is, just like what we do also, sometimes we give data to teachers and we say, look, this is not going to be used as high stakes for your evaluation. This is about you really looking at what's happening in your classroom and how to really improve the conditions in your classroom. I would say it's the same thing for this. We want our districts to really look at this data. And by the way, celebrate it if you're seeing you're well below the averages, because I mean, I see some of those that are close to zero. I'm like, hey, let's look at, let's celebrate that. And then understand the stories of when the numbers are above the average. Like, understand them first. And I always tell superintendents, lead with empathy. Let's understand what it is first, and then also understand the impact it might be having on your student achievement. And then we'll have those conversations. So hopefully that helps, because we didn't want it to become a scathing report that says we have whatever, you can imagine what it would be. I really wanted for this first year to be, let's understand it and let's get into a cadence of reporting it. And by the way, if there's data integrity issues, which all of us who work with data know there's always is, let's make sure we also address those issues. Interesting questions are coming out about, well, are certain leaves, and you heard it in the public comment, are certain leaves included, shouldn't be? So again, those are all good questions. Those are all good questions. Let's grapple with those issues. But at the end, what we want to get down to is we want districts to have ownership of the data and to understand how it's impacting what's happening in their classrooms.
Thank you, Commissioner. The other thing I would say, Member Mohammed, is, and having been doing this for a while, I think it's important when you release data for the first time to handle it to be careful and do things slowly and not rush to make judgments. To let the data breathe a little bit. We know that there's plenty of questions that can be asked of this data. We have plenty of questions that we might want to ask as well, and districts might as well too. So I think it was really important to acknowledge this as a release of data, right? Without coming to you with necessarily a lot of sort of academic analyses that are being done here, right? And just let it breathe a little bit. And we understand that the data will become not only of higher quality as time goes along, that's only natural for any data collection, but there'll be plenty of time and plenty of people that will be interested in asking some of the questions that I'm sure that will be out there.
Kudos for releasing the data. It's one of the few states that has turned this corner. And I do think that in this process of collecting the data, we should control for districts should be able to say, these folks are on leave, X, Y, and Z, so that we actually could have a more nuanced look at the data, particularly as we discuss resource allocation. So I don't think everything has to be a deficit mindset, but a superintendent could say, well, I need an additional investment because look at the rate of attendance. I'm controlling it at my level in these ways, but this is how DESE could support improving our numbers overall. So I'm a both and. Kudos on putting it out, and also it has to be more refined so that we can make meaning, because I tell myself that the outliers are significant, and there are ways that we could leverage investments to support this overall issue, some of which Member Stewart was addressing around mental health and wellness alone. Like, we need to be able to look at the data to unpack the root causes of why the attendance is what it is. And I suspect that though 11 is the average, when I think about the assessment data that you presented, we saw a direct correlation between the number of days students missed and their performance. And so if I were able to overlay those students' teacher data, what more would I learn? So I think that is, I don't want to speak for you, Member Mohammed, but I think that is the place that we are attempting to not point fingers or place blame, but in a commonwealth of significant resources, how can we be more precise around meeting those districts' needs around this critical conversation on attendance?
Yeah, thank you, Member Grant. I appreciate those comments. And those are, conversations as we continue on beyond the first year of reporting that we are open to having. As we've talked about many times with the student data, right? We've often had roughly an analogous conversation around student data about excused absences and losing access, and we've always kind of thought about it as, on the student side, about access to instruction, right? And that's what's actually being lost regardless of the reason in which it's being lost. And our mindset here was to create a consistent baseline and around around the absence, but certainly open to having conversations as we move forward. Sorry.
Go ahead, Delita.
Thank you. I do agree with Rob that access to the teachers, to the students having access to the teachers is really important and crucial to their learning. And I'm also wondering, to that point, how can we also be measuring access to the teachers even when the teachers are on leave, right? Because if we're going to use this data to sort of, you know, analyze and see how it's impacting student learning. I think it's also important to bring that aspect in because I'm thinking of my daughter who's at Doherty High School. She currently has a teacher who is on leave, but they have so much access to the teacher. The teacher is constantly sending material aside from what the substitute teacher is there for, currently sending material, asking the students to get in touch with them, sending the test and reviewing it within 24-hour period, which is actually sometimes less time than teachers who are actually present because sometimes there are teachers that are present, but the classroom is so packed that the students actually don't have access to the teacher, even though they're present in the classroom. So I'm just trying to figure out other ways that we could be measuring and seeing the impact of students having access to the teachers, even when they're on medical leave, and also I'm trying to think about the safeguards to ensure that this does not become a tool for punishment, or that the teachers themselves is internalizing that way, which then has a psychological impact on them, and more for, accountability and just like truly being able to understand the impact of this data.
Yeah, thank you, Member Husha. It's a great point in the segue to the first bullet here, right? Like, our intention here is that this attendance data is meant to complement the student data. There is in no way to be used as, to blame or anything, and I've said that directly to the superintendents last week. That's not the purpose here, and we are not talking about like using it in an accountability system at any point right now. So this is very much a release of data for the first time for an informational piece to be able to grow from and start a conversation, but it is in no way meant to blame anyone. And just like, frankly, when we release the student data, we would never turn around and say, well, this is the student's fault. That's not what we're doing here in any way.
But it does, board members. I think your comments are taking me in a particular direction, which is it's another way for our agency to understand what's going on in the field, and that's kind of what I'm hearing from you. So because we know that regardless, when we think about, even when you think about tutoring programs or after-school programs, we're trying to provide more instructional time to students because they need it. It could be very targeted, it could be very focused. And one of the things that we miss a lot is what happens during our regular school days and our regular structures when we have a teacher on leave. How do we make sure that students still getting access to that content? When students are absent, when teachers are absent, for whatever reason, how do we continue? Because at the end, that instructional time is just so valuable. And I can tell you from my experience, the schools that I've always seen that could really, improve and accelerate student achievement, one of the variables has always been how they maximize instructional time. And that instructional time, you can imagine that form, almost like that algebraic formula, right? It's not just as simple as, the length of the day. It is how much time do they actually have access to our teachers, right? And whatever that looks like. And so I think it's an interesting conversation. So I look at this as the beginning of how do we take information in a non-punitive way, but again, working with school districts, modeling it to say, let's go a little deeper. Because maybe there's some structural challenges that maybe as a state, we can actually help you with, because I can tell you as a superintendent, it's tricky. I mean, you're like, you have a lot, you're juggling a whole bunch of balls, including this topic, by the way. Coverage, and how do I find coverage for people on leave? It's a big challenge in K-12. So I think what I'm hearing from you board members is, we'll go deeper with this data, more as a support mechanism, and again, we'll continue to build on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner. And just a couple final points here, in addressing some of the questions that we've gotten, especially from our districts, right? We publish a lot more information about student attendance than we are today about staff attendance. And that is very intentional. Again, being super clear, this is just an initial data release. We are not we're not calling any staff member chronically absent in any way. We are not, we are releasing it only at the levels in which we talked about. The staff data has more nuance to it, and we need to learn, right? And understand, and be very open about that. We have staff with differing levels of employment requirements in terms of the number of days you're supposed to work. We have staff that are enrolled in multiple districts. Staff that are working in multiple districts, as opposed to students who are only enrolled in one district at a time. So there's a lot of nuance here that we're continuing to work on. And then finally, as the last bullet says, as we've been saying, we'll continue to work in terms of with our school districts to refine those collection guidelines as the collection grows. But this is just our initial release, and we're happy to provide the information publicly today. I know we've taken some questions already, but with that, happy to take any final questions.
I'll just make one other comment, and it's very much along the lines of what Christina was saying. First of all, I think it's terrific the data's out there. We have all sorts of other data available on the BESE website, some of which is regularly used by districts. Back when I called it DESE, not DESE, and no one ever corrected me, I used that staff retention data. It took like my 5th year on the school committee before someone actually said that's not what it's called. But there's a sensitivity to being punitive. I get all that. I would just say this. This can be used by districts and will be used by families, at least in some districts, a lot more than you might assume. And I can tell you, like Newton, I'm obviously most familiar with what parents are thinking. This is a huge issue without actually knowing how it compares to other districts. And what I would say is, like any data when it's out there for the first time, sure, there's all sorts of concerns. And on the other hand, be careful not to set yourself up so that the data becomes weaponized in a way that it undermines the credibility of the entire project. So that's consistent with what you're hearing. But I would say if there's what in your judgment are legitimate issues, don't footnote it in 6-point font or something. Change the way the data is being presented so that you can continue to use it and there's integrity. Just for an example, I don't think the issue to parents or districts is how many absences are allowed under a contract. The issue is how many absences are there. Now, it's different, obviously, if there's medical, I understand all that. This is really valuable data that will be used, and if you think something needs to be adjusted, you don't have to go through a many months process if you believe right up front it should be adjusted. That would be my advice.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Member Hills. Thank you. To be clear, right, we are confident in the data that we're releasing today under the way that we collected it and the way that we spoke to districts about it and offered them multiple opportunities to correct it, right? We are not in any way suggesting that the data is not of sufficient quality to be released publicly. We wouldn't do that, but I completely hear you. In terms of if we need to make adjustments, that we be upfront about that, and we will in the future. But as far as this data set goes, we believe in what we've collected and released today.
Any other questions or comments? Good presentation. Thank you. Thank you for doing this. Last quick comment before we leave. When the commissioner presents to us key priorities, which I guess is targeted at the next meeting, or whatever.
Or a retreat.
Whenever it is, we will then, the Commissioner Assessment Committee will meet, put together in a shortened period of time some key criteria that we'll use to do the assessment in May and June. And the committee is Christina, Erica, Marty, and myself. Will hopefully, if that happens after the December meeting, be able to vote in January. Just as a reminder, the last time we did this, which was really 2 years ago, last year was an unusual year, one side of one piece of paper for key criteria. This isn't a laundry list. This is key criteria that we'll use in assessing the commissioner. And next year, we'll start the process. We won't have a new commissioner in the middle of the summer, much earlier. So that's the game plan. Anything else before we go? We're done.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair Hill.